I'm Jim Mahon. I'm in the political science department at Williams. I've been teaching here for about 19 years. I want to talk about discussion classes not because I feel like I'm the absolute best at them, but because sometimes you consult the person who's in the process of learning and trying things, and they're probably more aware of what works and what doesn't than somebody who's mastered something and does so almost unconsciously. Well, I'll tell you, managing a discussion is really difficult because you have lots of variables from year to year and from class to class. One class might go on its own as if it were you wound it up and it worked just like a perfect watch. And another class, you're going to have somebody who tries to dominate it all the time. You'll have a bunch of people who resent that. You'll have some other people who will never want to talk. But you'll also have people who are not talking, not contributing as much as they could to a conversation that would really benefit for them, from them having brought themselves into it. So how do you facilitate the people who you'd like to see talk more? How do you get the people who are dominating to do less of it and maybe retreat and listen a little bit better? Another thing that makes it difficult is that I think that the kind of people who become professors, especially professors where there are contentious subjects out there like political science, might be the kind of people who always wanted to be or were that person who dominated the discussions back as an undergraduate. And the process of becoming a professor is a process of searching for venues in which they can dominate discussion. Now, all of us have to ask ourselves whether that's what we're doing, but I do think that it is hard no matter what, because if you've acquired a certain amount of expertise on something, you've taught a class a certain number of times, you know what kinds of things are likely to be interesting issues, interesting points. You've heard a lot of the points that students make before. It's not exactly really illuminating for you on that level. And so you then want to get it over with, or you want to cut to the chase, or you want to get them out the door with the 5 points that are most important on that issue. And you've got to not do that, because the whole point of discussion is that people will be brought to something and think through it more deeply by having the opportunity to express it themselves orally. That is, you've probably noticed that there are a lot of things that you didn't really feel like you knew until you actually said them. If that's true for you, it's also true in the classroom. It's also the key to a certain kind of pedagogy that says, if someone comes to something through speaking it, in an environment where they're being a little bit challenged, but they're welcome to speak, that learning is actually going to be deeper and more significant to that person than the kind of learning that they get by writing down something you put on the board. So let it happen. Let the silences happen. Let sometimes the difficult moments happen without too much intervention. Let the stumbling happen sometimes. One of the problems that we have at Williams here, I think, that is less severe at other places. For a 75-minute, twice-a-week class for a 12-week semester, you're adding up to 30 hours of face time, 30 hours of potential discussion time. That's not very much compared to our peers. And as we come to understand that, we often feel like we don't have a minute to waste in the classroom, and we can't let too much stumbling and too much silence happen. We got to get going. It's another thing that makes it hard to have real discussions happen. That's why an awful lot of my colleagues will have outside class discussions happening in cafes or over at the Student Union Center. So it's something I think you have to struggle with. If you have time, if you have discussion sections set aside, you can feel much more relaxed about delivering a certain amount of information by lecture or some other method in the main lecture part, and then having discussion sections just for lecture. Here at Williams, we have to try to do both. And sometimes that means that we don't create enough space. You've got to say, okay, here are 3 or 4 things that can happen in this 50 minutes that I've allocated to this. I've got to be comfortable with any of them happening. Maybe I'll only want 3 points to get across. Don't say 5 or 6, because you're going to end up squashing things. But students also find themselves dissatisfied if they come to the end of discussion section and they don't have something that they can say, here are the 3 things that we learned in this discussion. So there's a certain fine line between directing things and intervening too much. On the other hand, moving into the discussion at the appropriate moments in order to highlight a point that you think is worth highlighting, worth people writing down in their books and saying, okay, that's one of the things we learned today. That's the trick, and good luck trying to implement it.